Hey guys, this is Bill from Linden, Tennessee. So, it's been a minute since I did the last update. A couple new things going on here, as you can see. Yes, I got a TV. I got a TV in my shop now, so that's pretty cool. We went to Walmart and got a, was it 40 inch or 50 inch or something like that, big, 60 inch maybe. I don't know, it was like $250, and it's a smart TV, so, it listens to the internets and you can play YouTube on it. It's ridiculous. It's like $250. That one up there on the wall is a 32 inch and I paid almost $1,500 for it. So anyway, the march of technology. The other exciting thing, not so exciting, is that little dude right there, that scar. Turns out my big beefy bicep, the tendon was trying to pull itself off of the bone, and it had almost accomplished that before an MRI pointed it out, and I elected to get that fixed, and it's been a terrible recovery. It's been really, really painful. There for a long time I had no movement of my wrist at all, and yeah, it's just been awful. So anyway, but we're getting better now. I can safely, confidently say I'm feeling better after 3 weeks, almost 4, and that's good. This has actually been my first day out in the garage since the surgery, back at the end of last month, back at the end of October, or the end of September. Anywho, what am I doing here? I'm doing a lot of stuff here. Right there, I got the front battery box out again, so that can't be good. The other thing, remember last time we talked about my inverter got blown out, and there's 2 ways to control your Tesla drive unit. You can either replace the board, the drive unit control board that Tesla puts in there from the factory, with a aftermarket, one that's been designed and built for the purpose. That way you can, program it to run the controller, to run the inverter. The other way to do it is to leave the factory control board in there and use an external module to trick the factory control board into thinking that it's actually still in the car. So I went with option 1 at first when I bought this drive unit from Stealth EV. They use the 0 EV control board, and it blew out my inverter. Well, I can't blame it. I'm not going to blame it, but my inverter blew out. A friend of mine also, his inverter blew out. Again, correlation, causation, I don't know. But I decided to just go ahead and get a different control board, to do option 2, where you have an external control board. There's a company called EV Controls, and they provide an external control board. So that's what I'm going to do. Unfortunately, that requires some degree of rewiring of all the wires going into the motor, and so I've got to do that. Another thing that I'm going to do, on the very short drives that I did get with the Land Rover, or with the Jeep, the power steering didn't seem like it was working exactly the way I wanted to, and I probably could have made it work the way I wanted to. However, Super Fast Matt and also Jerry Rig Everything, they're doing conversions also. Super Fast Matt is doing a Jaguar, and Jerry Rig Everything is doing a military spec Humvee, and they're using an electric power steering system, kind of like what's on a 4-wheeler, or almost all modern cars nowadays use this sort of a system. So you got an electric motor up here, and then there's a torque sensor in here, and when it detects that you've twisted the steering wheel, that torque sensor detects the torque, and it applies the motor in the correct direction. It's got a worm, a gear, and it provides an electric assist to steer the vehicle. Doing this for a couple of reasons. First of all, like I mentioned, it didn't feel right the first time, and yes, I could have fixed it. That could have taken some time. And second of all, the other system that I was using with a MR2 hydraulic pump, it's kind of complicated. There's, hydraulic lines and fittings and reservoirs and pumps, and it's a little bit noisy when it is running, and lines leak and will continue to leak, and the lines are hard to get to. The other thing is, coming up with a system that turns the thing off when you want it to be off and comes on when you want it to come on. What I noticed on my test drive is, even when I was going slow enough that my speed sensor didn't come into play, there's a delay between whenever the micro switch on the steering arm micro switches and the actual pump coming on, and that's just that's just how that is, and that's just how it's designed. I'm sure in the MR2 they run it through CAN bus and it's much faster. I don't know. Has to be, because that'd be unacceptable. Or they just leave it running all the time at below a certain speed or something. I don't know how they do it. I don't really care. I'm going with this way. And in order to get that in here, I bought a second intermediate shaft. This goes from the steering column inside the car, inside the Jeep, to outside the Jeep. So I'm going to use that to either mock up how this thing's going to go in the actual Jeep, or, you know, modify this one with that in it and use it in the Jeep. And I'll have to make up some bracketry to solidly mount this device to the frame so that it can't torque backwards, so it can't twist backwards on me. So that's what I'm doing. And also, while I'm here and having fun, I got the battery out and things back on tires again, I'm replacing these springs. I went to a company that I can't remember the name, but I'll find the name and I'll put it up here. Those guys. Went there and had them build me some custom springs. This was a 4-cylinder Jeep. Yeah, so you can see the comparison. This is the original 4-cylinder Jeep. This is the lifted spring that came from Iron Rock suspension. It's provided the long arm kit, and you know, you can see it's a couple inches taller, and it's stiffer, and that just gives you, you know, anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of lift. But with, you know, 800 pounds of batteries in the front, where there was 600 pounds of engine and transmission, it squats. Oh, it doesn't squat, but it's just, it rides low. So I had those guys make me some springs here with a 200-pound heavier rate in the front. In the back is where I really had a problem, because normally a Jeep doesn't have any batteries in the back, but I've elected to put about 700 pounds of batteries in the back, 600 pounds of batteries and frames and all that stuff in the back. And that makes the back squat a lot. And so I had them build me up a set of springs that has a 600-pound heavier spring rate. So that should get my suspension off of the bump stops. And in fact, bump stops wise, I actually made some. So these are going to be these are the little bump stops. Now that I've remembered to do that, I got to pull this spring back off again. This is the new spring, but that's going to go in there, and basically it'll bump up against the stop whenever the spring is compressed at a bump or something. So that's what that's going to do. I just drilled and tapped this has got a 1/2-13 bolt thing in the bottom of it, and I can just come up from the bottom and put a bolt in just to hold this thing in. There's a little convenient hole right there that I can drill through, and yeah, and that's how that's going to work. So yeah, so that's how that's going to work. And so yeah, that's what I got going on now. So I've probably still got another 2 weeks off of work until the doctor releases me, and I'm kind of taking it easy in here because while it's not really as painful as it was, it still does hurt. My elbow does. And oh yeah, the other thing I still got to do with the new drive unit, I got to split the cases back apart again and RTV it, and then you know, reinstall it. So a bit of work to do. Something else that I've kind of been working on is interior. Just got the carpet kind of laying in there. I've still got to cut around where the combination or the distribution box is, and I got to reroute some wires a little bit, and that'll be cool. So, but that's all. That's what I've been up to. Basically nothing for the last 3 weeks, just because I couldn't. But now that I can, I am. I got to admit, it's kind of hard to get back on this, and it had crossed my mind a couple times to just put the tires on this damn thing and, you know, wheel it over to this side of the shop and work on something else for a little while at my, you know, cool my you know, just to cool it from it for a little while, because I was getting a little annoyed with it. But I think it's going to end up being better. I think this controller is going to work better. No, the power steering is going to be better. Now, that power steering pump is the power steering system is from a Prius, so considerably less weight and much smaller tires. But I think it'll have at least equal turning assist to an MR2, which also doesn't have an engine in the front and has skinny tires. So, yeah, I think it'll be a damn sight better than no power assist at all with 31-inch tires. It may not be, you know, amazing. Like if I ever did take this thing rock crawling or something, it may struggle in a situation like that. But I don't know. What I do know is that it'll be better than what I've got on there currently. So I think that's going to do it for this update. If you've been watching this for a while, I appreciate you watching it. And if you're new to the channel, welcome, and feel free to go through old videos and see what we've done, how we got to where we are. But anyway, yeah, I think that's it. So as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. So I showed you the front, how I went about how I had to change the springs on that and got the battery box out and all that stuff. So on the back, I wanted to kind of show you what it is that I'm doing, how I'm lifting this thing up just to get these springs out, because you have to obviously lift it up pretty high to get the springs out. So I mean, basically there's a couple ways of doing this. Let's look at method one. Method one is what I like to call dangerous. Yeah, so this is what's known as a high lift jack. It's also referred to as a widowmaker. They're kind of dangerous things. They work good. There's a lot of uses for them other than picking up a car, and there for a long time that was the way you would lift up a car to change the tires on it. But they do have their problems, that the biggest being that they can be unstable once you get the vehicle lifted up. They're very susceptible to just sort of rocking to the side, and once that happens, it's over and the whole thing comes crashing down, quite literally, hopefully not on you. So one idea I had for picking this thing up was to go to my neighbor, and he's got a high lift jack, or he's got a bucket on the front of his tractor. We just lift up the back bumper, pretty much what I'm doing here. But I wanted to try this first. So this is honestly couldn't tell you where I got this from, but it's an engine hoist. But it doesn't matter. It's a 2-ton total engine hoist. The first on the left there is where the pins I've normally got it in. When you got it extended out that way, it's rated at a 1/2 ton, and then the next one over is 1 ton, and then the one I've got the bolt in right now, that's the position for 1.5 ton. I figured that the whole Jeep probably weighs 5,000 pounds or something like that, but just lifting up the back, I don't know how much it'd be, but I had it in my mind that it wouldn't be more than about 1.5 tons. So there you go, 3,000 pounds lift, and it didn't have any problem picking it up. So that's what I did, and I just took a strap and wrapped it around the bumper a whole bunch of times, and that's it. So that's how I did that. And then kind of wanted to show you also, here's the comparison of the back springs. The one on the left is the OEM spring, and the one in the middle is what I took out from the Iron Rock suspension kit, and then there's a new one. So it's a 600-pound heavier coil rate. I did take a picture of this shock when it was sitting before I changed the springs out, and it had about 1 inch of travel. Normally it's even less than that, because with the drive unit in and the front battery box in, it's like less than a 1/2 inch of travel before that shock goes up there and hits that bump stop. In fact, you can see how it's kind of nasty up here on top, because the one time that I did drive this thing, it definitely bottomed itself out. And to have a shock be the method of keeping a suspension system from bottoming out using that little rubber stop is a terrible idea. The shock would probably survive just fine, but that top shock mount or the bottom shock mount may not. So what I've done is I made these little they're just aluminum stops. I measured how far, how much travel there was, and then just made this the correct length. And then all I got to do is I just drill and tap the hole in there. Well, this is hard to do looking through a camera. I drilled and tapped the hole right there, and I'll just, once the spring is on, I'll just screw that down in there and tighten it down with some channel locks, and that'll be good. Put some Loctite on there so it doesn't go anywhere. In the front, I use bolts coming up through the bottom of the spring perch, and that worked out fine. Yeah, so just kind of wanted to show that this is just one method of doing it. It seems much safer way of doing it. And if something does go wrong and this thing, something lets go, then the Jeep is just coming straight down, which in my brain anyway, I wouldn't want that to happen. But if it was going to happen, I would rather it just, go straight down and not sideways. Sideways seems much more dangerous for some reason anyway. So that's it. That's what we got going on here. This is actually the highest travel that the shock will allow. And I think eventually I'm going to switch these axles over to 1-ton axles at some point. And if and when I do that, I'll probably definitely make some limit straps. A limit strap would basically just be a big cargo strap that like bolts up here and goes, then goes down to the axle. Just have a bolt down there somewhere welded to the axle. It'll just keep it from overextending the shock, which is much worse for the shock than over compressing the shock is for the shock mounts. Anyway, that is what I'm doing now. So, and once you've got these things lifted up high enough, the springs go in and out pretty easy. It's nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. So, yeah. One thing that you may end up having to do if your shocks don't extend far enough is you might have to take the shock off, at least the bottom mount, bottom bolt, and then you can just put them on up there. So there you go. All right, that's it for now. We'll talk to you again. Well, new springs installed, and they are the exact same ride height. Well, that sucks.